Let me tell you a story, one that will make you question everything you think you know about the world. This isn't something you'll find in books or movies. This is a true story, witnessed by my own eyes, and it shook me to my core. It all started back in 2014 when I was a college student. I was young, naive, and an absolute disbeliever in the supernatural. I thought ghosts were just figments of the imagination, stories people told to scare themselves. I'd laugh at the idea of haunted places, even dreamed of visiting places like Bungar, just to prove to myself how safe I was, how invincible. But what happened to my friend's family shattered that false sense of security, and it changed me forever. I had a friend, let's call him Arjun, and his family was decent, well-educated, and lived a comfortable life. His younger sister, who we'll call S, was around 12 at the time. She was a bubbly, cheerful kid, full of life. But then, something happened. A series of events that none of us could explain. It started with a strange mark on her forehead, a burn mark, almost as if someone had pressed a cigarette to her skin. But it wasn't just a random injury. This mark appeared every month on the same spot, right after the night of the new moon. And it wasn't just the mark. S would fall ill, complain of weakness, and tell the same story, a dream that would haunt her every time. In her dream, she would see a blurred man. He would approach her, his voice soft, cold. He would say, "Here, child, give me your hand and come with me. There's nothing in this world." We tried to laugh it off. We told ourselves, she's just a kid, she's probably imagining it. But the signs kept coming. Every month, the same mark, the same dream. And then, in 2015, things took a turn for the worse. It was the night of a big family gathering at Arjun's place. They stayed up late, and, as fate would have it, it was another new moon night. Everyone had gone home. It was around 2 or 3 a.m. when things went horribly wrong. S suddenly started feeling very unwell. Her mother tried to calm her down, but something was wrong. S insisted she had to sleep. Her eyes sank into her skull, like something was pulling her in. Her mother tried to wake her up, but she wouldn't respond. They tried shaking her, but it was as if she was in a deep trance, her body unyielding. And then, in front of everyone, something horrifying happened. Arjun and his father struggled to open her tightly clenched fists, but when they did, they were struck frozen in fear. Her palm was covered in deep, vertical cuts, more than 20 of them, like something had scraped into her skin, sharp and deliberate. As if that wasn't enough, within moments, the same burn mark, the same cigarette-like mark, appeared on her forehead. There was no way this could have happened on its own. Panic ensued. They rushed to hospitals, local ones, then even a prestigious one. But no one believed them. Doctors dismissed it as something minor. It was only when they went to a place called Therapeth, known for its occult practices, that they finally found someone who could help. There, an experienced Baba, a spiritual guide, told them something that turned their world upside down. The Baba revealed that S had unknowingly stepped on a sacred object 4 years ago. That act had released a demon, a force that had been feeding off her ever since. Every Amavasya night, the demon would try to possess her. It would appear in her dreams, trying to pull her into its world, and the physical symptoms, the marks, the cuts, were just the beginning. The Baba performed a ritual, an exorcism of sorts, and after that, Sipas estas injured. Everything stopped. The marks didn't appear again. The dreams faded. S was safe. But the reality of what happened left me stunned. I had always mocked the idea of ghosts and demons, thinking they were nothing more than old myths, stories to scare the weak-minded. But after hearing this, after witnessing the terror they experienced, I can't deny it anymore. There's something out there, something we can't see, something we don't understand. So, to those who think they know it all, to those who laugh and scoff at stories like this, I urge you, be careful. Don't be too sure of what you know. because sometimes the things that happen in the dark are far more real than you could ever imagine. Be safe and stay away from what you don't understand. This is a story passed down in my family, a story of gratitude, a debt, and the inexplicable forces that lurk beyond our understanding. A story that still sends chills down my spine whenever I think about it. It takes place many years ago, when my grandfather, a man of great means in his village, often made trips to the nearby town. The town was about 15 kilometers away, a stretch that would take him most of the day to travel back and forth. The roads weren't like they are today. Back then, the village was poorly electrified, and the journey through the outskirts and the open fields was treacherous. Once night fell, the darkness would swallow everything, making it difficult to find your way. Now, my grandfather was a generous man. He helped many of the villagers, whether it was with their crops or finances. One such villager was a farmer named Shankar. Shankar was a proud man, but one who had fallen on hard times. He owed my grandfather a large sum of money my grandpa had lent him for the marriage of his only daughter. Shankar was forever grateful, and he revered my grandpa, always holding him in the highest regard. One evening, as Grandpa was returning home from the town, the sky began to darken faster than usual. The rain had started to pour, and soon, the roads were nothing but a series of puddles and mud. Grandpa lost his way, struggling to see through the heavy rain, unable to find the familiar path back to the village. As the minutes dragged on and worry began to take hold, he heard a voice behind him. It was familiar, comforting even. It was Shankar, holding a lamp to light the way. The lamp flickered brightly in the dark, casting long shadows on the path. Shankar immediately told my grandpa to start walking, guiding him with the lamp from behind. He spoke in his usual, calm manner and told my grandfather one thing: don't look back. And so, Grandpa obeyed. He didn't question it. After all, it was Shankar, the man who owed him so much. They began walking together. The rain pounded harder, but the light from the lamp guided them through the darkness. They spoke of many things as they walked. Grandpa asked about Shankar's daughter, how she was doing. They discussed the rains and how they had affected the crops that year. The conversation was casual, almost normal, but the entire time, Grandpa never once looked behind him. After what seemed like an eternity, they reached the edge of the village. The houses were just ahead, their outlines dimly visible through the mist. Shankar stopped, telling my grandpa that he couldn't go any further. He had somewhere else to be. Grandpa thanked him, and without another word, Shankar turned and walked away. Grandpa, now at the edge of the village, continued on his own, unaware that something was very wrong. As he walked deeper into the village, he noticed a group of people gathered, talking in low voices. Something in their conversation caught his attention. They were discussing the death of Shankar. It was that very day, the day Grandpa had been walking with him in the rain, that Shankar had passed away. When Cyrus had watched his daughter die, he'd taken Aya's hand. The moment later, Grandpa's body had pinned them to the floor. Suddenly, it all clicked into place. It wasn't Shankar who had been walking beside him. It wasn't his friend, the farmer he had helped. It was something else, something not of this world. Shankar had died hours earlier, yet there he was, guiding my grandfather through the dark, leading him safely home. My grandfather understood then that it wasn't just a simple favor, a gesture of gratitude. Shankar, or whatever had taken his form, had returned from beyond the grave to honor the debt he owed. That night, my grandpa came to a realization that would stay with him forever. There are debts in this world that go beyond the physical. There are forces we cannot see, and sometimes the ties that bind us to the living can reach far into the afterlife. And so, to this day, the villagers whisper about the night Shankar helped guide my grandfather home, not as a man, but as a spirit, a soul still bound by gratitude and debt. Be careful what debts you owe, for some debts are never truly settled. It was November 17th, 1996, when I was 21. I had left Mumbai late in the afternoon, heading to my grandparents' house in the Konkan region. The drive was long, and as luck would have it, I had a flat tire along the way, which caused an unexpected delay. Harni, a quiet beach village in Konkan, is where my grandparents lived. There are two main routes to get there. One goes through Head and Dapoli via NH3, while the other, which is shorter but lonelier at night, passes through Gorgaon, Ambet, Mandangad, Kelshi, and Inyarli. Since I was running late, I decided to take the latter. It was around 11:30 p.m. when I reached the outskirts of Mandangad, on my way to Kelshi. That's when I saw her. A girl, waving her hand, standing beside the road. There was a small hill to the right and a house in the distance, but no one else in sight. I stopped my car and she came over to the passenger side. She was about 15 or 16, with a calm expression on her face. She knocked on the glass and I rolled it down. She was wearing a salwar kameez, her dupatta wrapped around her ears to shield herself from the cold. Her voice was soft but urgent. She asked me if I could drop her off at Anjarli. She had to get there urgently, and she couldn't wait to get there. I was on a long, tiring drive and frankly bored. Anjarli was on my way, so I agreed to give her a ride. She sat in the passenger seat and we started talking. Her name was Ratna. She told me she had been visiting her uncle in Mandangad, but she missed the last bus, which left at 10 p.m. She needed to get to Anjarli for an early school exam, she said. I was surprised. I asked how her uncle had let her travel alone at this hour, and she explained that he had planned to take her after dinner, but he had fallen ill with a fever and couldn't, so she was left with no choice. We continued talking for a while, the road stretching on endlessly. By the time we passed Kelshi, I noticed something odd. She told me to stop. We were approaching Anjarli, and I stopped the car near a beach. There was a hill to the left, and I couldn't figure out where she planned to go. She got out and said her house was just behind the hill. I offered to walk her there for safety, but she looked at me sharply and refused. She said, "I will meet you again, go away." Her voice had changed, and something about her demeanor felt off. I got back in the car and drove on, feeling uneasy, but trying to shake it off. I reached my grandparents' house a little later than expected, and they were surprised to see me so late. I told them about the strange encounter with the girl. They immediately warned me not to stop on that road at night, as it was known to be haunted. I didn't believe in such things back then and shrugged it off. The next few days, I toured the area, visiting the Suvarnanoga Fort, a sea fort like Janjira and Sinhuduga. While relaxing at Anjarli Beach with a few friends, I noticed a man walking down from the hill. He seemed out of place, as Anjarli Beach was a quiet, deserted area. I struck up a conversation with him. He said he lived on the other side of the hill, and I asked him if he knew anyone by the name of Ratna. He looked at me strangely and said, "Ratna was my daughter. She passed away 10 years ago." I was shocked. How could it be the same girl? I told him about my encounter with Ratna 2 nights ago, describing everything in detail. His expression changed as I spoke. He told me that Ratna had indeed been coming from Mandangad that night, the night she died. Ratna had hitchhiked after missing the last bus, but the car she was in had crashed near that very spot. The driver survived, but Ratna died on the spot. She had died 10 years ago. I still didn't believe it. Could it have been a different Ratna, with the same name? I followed him to his house on the other side of the hill. When I walked in, I saw a photograph of a young girl on the wall, surrounded by a garland of flowers. It was the same girl I had met, the very same Ratna. As I stood there, a chilling thought crossed my mind. What would have happened if I had insisted on walking her to the house? What would she have said or done? And then the realization hit me. Ratna had died on November 17th, 10 years ago. the very same day I had met her. I asked her family if they had ever felt her presence or if anyone had seen her after her death. They said no. I asked around the village, but no one had seen or encountered her again in the past 10 years. The memories of that encounter stayed with me as I left Harnai and drove back. I couldn't shake the thought of the girl who had appeared exactly 10 years after her death. Some questions still linger in my mind. Where had she been for the past 10 years? What made her come back after all this time? Why did she meet me on that exact day, 10 years after her death? What did she mean when she said, "I will meet you again"? One thing I'm sure of, Ratna didn't mean to harm me. She didn't want to scare me. If she had every opportunity to do so during the hour we spent together. And so the memories faded, but the mystery remained. Maybe I'll never have the answers, but I'll never forget the girl who came back from the dead. I don't know if ghosts exist, but I did hear a story, one that still haunts me to this day. It's about a newlywed couple, young, adventurous, and full of life. They loved to travel, especially to old cities and towns with rich histories. One day they decided to visit a town, ancient and full of mystery. But what they didn't know was that some places are better left untouched. This town, with its old temples, palaces, and gardens, was beautiful. But there was one place they were told never to enter. A grand Haveli, a massive ancient building surrounded by a garden, its large gates always closed. Nobody had seen anyone leave the Haveli in years. The couple arrived at their hotel, which, strangely, was nearly empty. Only the hotel manager and an old man who served them seemed to be around. The manager told them that it was the rainy season, so the visitors were few. The first day was lovely, visiting temples, taking in the town's beauty. But the next morning, they decided to visit the remaining sites, and that's when things took a turn. They stopped at a small dhaba for tea, where the waiter warned them not to go beyond the park they were planning to visit. "Don't go any further," he said, his voice low. The couple laughed it off. "Why?" they asked. The waiter hesitated, his eyes darting to the side. "It's said that there's a Haveli beyond the park. It's the home of a witch," he murmured. "She kidnaps young women, takes their body parts. That's all I'll say. It's best you don't go there." The couple, skeptical and feeling brave, waved off the warning and decided to visit the Haveli anyway. They reached the imposing gates and pushed them open. Inside was a silent garden, the air thick with mystery. They took pictures and explored, but nothing seemed out of place. They left, feeling confident that the stories were just that, stories. That night, after dinner, they invited the old man to join them. He sat down with them, his face serious, his voice low. "Did you visit the park by the lake?" "Of course, it was beautiful, but we also went to that Haveli the waiter warned us about. It was fine, really." Poe continued his thought. "You went there, but why? Didn't you hear about the witch who lives there?" "Ha. A witch? That's just a rumor, Kaka. We're fine, see? Nothing happened." "No, you don't understand. Years ago, girls started disappearing, young women. They say the witch, more than 100 years old, kidnaps them and takes what she likes, usually their hair. She's locked in that Haveli now, but people say she can still take what she wants." "Ha, that's just an old tale, Kaka. You don't believe that stuff, do you?" "Of course I believe it. I do. Just remember, some places are better left alone." The old man left quickly, his face pale. The couple laughed, brushing off the warning. They finished their meal and turned off the lights, ready for sleep. But as the night deepened, something strange happened. In the dead of night, the husband was woken by a strange sound. It was a voice, a woman's voice, counting. 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, he mumbled, half asleep, still lying in bed. "Why you countin', love? We need to sleep. We're leaving tomorrow." He drifted back to sleep, unaware of what was truly happening. The voice continued. louder now, more insistent. 200 100 200 100 200 100. Set a new alarm every day for 10 minutes by reciting the following mantra. Why are you counting money at this hour? The counting grew louder, quicker. Then, suddenly, the sound of a door creaking open, followed by it slamming shut. The husband sat up, startled. What was that? He turned to his side and noticed that his wife was gone. He opened the door, heart pounding, but what he saw nearly shattered him. In the hallway, his wife lay motionless on the floor. And the horror wasn't just in her death. Her hair. It was gone. Every strand, gone. The realization hit him like a cold wave. The voice he'd heard, the counting, it had been the witch, counting the hairs she'd taken from his wife. She had been watching them from the moment they entered that Haveli. She had taken what she wanted, the hair of the woman she found beautiful. The next day, he went to the hotel manager and asked about his wife. The manager's face went pale when he heard the story. You should have listened to the warning, he said. The witch. She only takes what she desires. The husband never returned to the town. He couldn't. He couldn't shake the image of his wife lying there, bald, lifeless, taken by something otherworldly. And the worst part, the witch had told him in her chilling voice that she would meet him again. Never ignore warnings. Some rules are meant to be followed. Some places are better left alone. This happened many decades ago, when I was just a young schoolboy. Imagine those days. No smartphones, no video games, no internet, not even CDs or DVDs. A time when entertainment meant going to the cinema, especially if you were a boy in a small, dusty town in southern India. I lived in such a town, near the East Coast. We rented a small house, close to the railway line that ran through the heart of the town, connecting Madras to Calcutta. The line sliced the town in two, dividing the old, familiar streets to the west and the newer developments to the east. We children eagerly awaited the rare visits to the movie theater, and there was a film I had been waiting for, one that had captured the hearts of many back in the day, an old black and white classic, re-released to the screen. And so, naturally, I was excited. The film was showing at the Vijaya Mahal, a theater across the railway line on the eastern side of town. For some reason, I decided to attend the late night show. It would start around 10 p.m. and last until nearly 1 a.m. After some grumbling, I received permission from my family. The day came, and after an early dinner, I was off. The theater was nearly empty, but I didn't mind. I was lost in the excitement of the movie, fights, songs, and action scenes flashing across the screen. The hours flew by. It was nearly 1 a.m. when the film ended. The few people left the theater, each taking their own path through the night. And me? I was walking back home, lost in the world of the movie, replaying the scenes over and over in my head, feeling the thrill of it all. Now, further along the railway line, there was a manned gate a kilometer from the theater, where traffic would cross to the other side. But at 1 a.m., the town was still and silent. There were no cars, no people, only the sounds of crickets from the wayside bushes. Instead of taking the manned crossing, I decided to make a shortcut, crossing the railway tracks myself. I walked past the thorny bushes that lined the railway, crossing them with little thought. I reached the steep embankment of crushed gravel, my feet crunching the ground as I began climbing. The night had swallowed everything around me. The crickets stopped their chorus. The air felt heavier, stiller. To my right, I could barely see the faint lights around the manned gate, dim and far away. I made my way up the embankment, oblivious to anything but the film in my mind. But suddenly, something soft brushed against my feet. I froze. The darkness seemed to close in around me. I looked down, but I couldn't see anything. My feet were lost in the thick, inky blackness. I bent down closer, my hand reaching instinctively, still lost in the thoughts of my movie. What was it? I felt it then. Something soft. My fingers curled around it. Slowly, the fog of my distraction began to lift. I became aware of the air around me, the crickets starting up again, the gravel beneath my bare feet, and something else, something that made my skin crawl. I was kneeling, face inches from the ground, and that's when I saw it. Two eyes, wide, unblinking, staring directly into mine. They were eyes, but they weren't alive. And in my hand, I felt hair, soft, wet, lifeless. I was holding it, a head, a human head, a woman's head. Donna, I couldn't breathe. My body went numb. Slowly, I let go of the hair. My legs trembled. My heart pounded in my chest as I backed away. Slowly, cautiously, one step, then another. I moved away from her, from the thing lying in the darkness. I climbed the second embankment, heart hammering. I kept my eyes straight ahead, not daring to look back. What was that? What was it? I had to get away. I couldn't think about it. I couldn't. I crossed the second track, but something caught my eye. Just a flash, barely visible in the distance. Was it a body? A headless body? I didn't want to know. I descended the embankment, not once turning back. My feet were moving, stumbling almost over the thorny bushes, scratching, tearing at my skin. I didn't care. I had to leave. I had to leave. Finally, I reached the road. The light from a flickering lamppost fell on me, its weak light cast over the ground. I looked down at my feet. No more soft touches. Nothing. I didn't want to look at my right hand. I couldn't. It was sticky, almost gummy, as though something from that place had clung to me. And then I started running as quietly as I could so as not to wake what lay behind me. The next day, the local newspaper, Zamin Raitu, ran a story about a woman who had thrown herself in front of a train. They said no one knew why, what had driven her to such despair, what hopelessness led her to her death. I could never forget that night. Some memories, they never fade. They're like scars, burned deep into the soul. I never told anyone about that night. Not my family, not anyone. How could I? How could I tell them about the hair, the eyes? I didn't sleep much that night, but I didn't fall sick either. No fever, no shock. I was fine on the outside. But in my mind, it took a long time for darkness to just be darkness again. Not something with damp hair and staring eyes.